Hi, my name is Chase Baird, and I play the electronic wind instrument in Circuit Kisser, and we are here today in Circuit Kisser Studios in the kitchen, the birthplace of faking the moon landing. And I'm here to talk to you guys today about some of the things that I go for when I'm playing the electronic wind instrument in terms of programming, playing, things that I do to get it to sound human and natural. And also talk to you guys a little bit about the equipment I'm using, the synthesizers, and the various effects. So my background is primarily as a saxophone player, and I've played EWI on and off for probably close to 15 years, but I really started getting into it in the last 2 or 3. A big part of that was joining Antonio Sanchez's group Migration, and he asked me to play it, and so I kind of took it to the nth degree and really shed it and also learned to program for it. When I got into EWI, one of the things I was surprised to discover is that the challenges of playing the instrument are sort of the exact opposite of playing the saxophone. On the saxophone, you're investing a lot of time and energy trying to find equipment that works efficiently, that enables you to play in tune. You're spending a lot of time working on those things. The EWI sort of doesn't have those problems. Out of the box, it plays in tune. It's generating a pretty good tone. The issue that you have is that you want to get the EWI to sound more human. I essentially spent years trying to get the saxophone to sound more perfect, and I've now spent several years trying to get the EWI to sound more imperfect and human. So the electronic wind instrument, or the EWI as some of you guys may have heard it referred to before, is essentially a MIDI controller. This right here. The player programs it to respond to a synthesizer. And I've got 2 analog synthesizers here, a DSI Prophet 08 and a vintage Akai EWI 2000. I use 2 different EWI controllers. I primarily play a 4000S that I've had for about 12 or 13 years. I love it. It's very, very comfortable to me at this point. I also own and love and play this vintage Akai EWI 1000 that I bought from Matt Traum at Patchman Music. I had this one modded with this very cool vintage computer cable, so it'll be able to last for a few more years than it might have otherwise. The reason I'm playing this one today is because I wanted to show you guys in particular how the EWI 2000 sounds, and to do so I have to play this particular controller. So I've actually routed MIDI out from the EWI into a DSI Prophet 08. The Dave Smith synth here is my primary synth. It's what I use at home in the studio. Used it a ton on the Circuit Kisser record. I've programmed quite a few lead patches and also chordal patches that I use on this instrument. Most wind controllers that you can buy, whether it be from Akai or Roland or Yamaha, come loaded with a bank of generic preloaded sounds. To really get into the EWI and to unlock the full potential of what it can be as an instrument, you need to learn synthesis and learn to program for a breath controller. Let's take a look at that now. The fundamentals of synthesis are exactly the same whether you're using a breath controller or a keyboard. All synthesizers are composed of different components. The most fundamental is your tone generator. We call it an oscillator. The oscillator has various waveforms that generate different types of sounds. Here is a sawtooth. And a triangle wave. And a square wave. After you've selected your waveform, in this case I've selected a sawtooth for the example, the next step in your signal chain is what we call the filter section. That's this section here on the Prophet. The Prophet is equipped with a low-pass filter. The low-pass filter essentially determines how bright or dark this tone is. Right now that low-pass filter is completely open and the tone sounds like this. As I begin to adjust the low-pass filter, I can get the tone to have different degrees of brightness and darkness. It sounds like this. As a saxophonist, we want to be able to adjust the brightness and darkness of our tone with our breath. The same is true with the EWI. We achieve that by routing our breath sensor to the low-pass filter. I've set here a particular threshold of brightness and darkness, so the more air I put into the instrument, the more that the envelope opens up and the brighter the tone becomes. The way to program the EWI to respond to an outboard analog synthesizer is pretty much going to be the same across the board. You're communicating from the EWI to the synth via a MIDI channel. EWI typically sends on MIDI channel 2, but I know some have been set to 1 or other different channels. You just have to check and see where your specific controller has been programmed to send MIDI data. So just as it's important to send your breath signal to the low-pass filter, you also want to send it to what's called the amp envelope. That determines your volume. Obviously, as a saxophone player, the harder you blow, the louder it gets. You want to have the same kind of response on an EWI. For demonstration purposes, I've turned off the breath routing to the low-pass filter and isolated it going to the amp so that you can hear how breath controls the volume on a synthesizer with breath control. When you route your breath control to both the low pass and the amp, you have a very basic but incredibly expressive EWI sound. Here's what they sound like together. One of the important components in terms of getting a wind controller sound is getting a good articulation. One trick that someone hit me to a while back to get that is routing an extra envelope to the pitch of one of the main oscillators. An envelope is essentially a set of time-based parameters that can be used to control any aspect of the synthesizer. So in this case, again, it's going to the pitch. It's creating a slight warble at the beginning of the pitch. That is actually something that happens on all woodwind and brass instruments. We just don't necessarily think about it in these terms. Here's what it sounds like without that. As I begin to dial in the amount of this third envelope, you can hear how there's arc to the pitch right at the beginning of the note. And then obviously I worked to dial it into a level that sounds more like a natural articulation. Just as you find your voice on a wind instrument through experimentation over the years with tone, you can really find your voice on the EWI through programming. The slightest adjustments in settings can make a world of a difference in terms of your personal expression. This has really been the thing that I found to be the most fun in EWI programming, is designing my own patches. I want to quickly demo for you guys some of the sounds that I've programmed for the Prophet. This is kind of my main sound. It's called Lightbender. Here's kind of a more chorusy version of that. Achieved that by detuning the oscillators a little bit and assigning some LFOs to kind of make stuff a little crazier. A LFO, which stands for low frequency oscillator, is essentially an oscillator that doesn't sound, and you can route to most anywhere on the synth to sort of create different effects. In this case, it's going to the pitch to kind of create some more warbles and a few other places. Here is a patch that I designed with a whole bunch of feedback. Prophet 08 calls it audio mod, kind of like a strange glide function. The result is it sounds sort of like distortion. The last patch I want to show you guys is one I designed called Arid Light. I used this on the CIRCA Kisser album on CIRCA 1986. EWI, you have these two thumb controllers right here that are essentially the keyboard equivalent of a mod wheel. And they enable you to bend the pitch based on a particular amount that you set it. I usually set it about a whole step. And often when I'm playing the EWI, I'm sort of goosing the upper thumb sensor here all the time, just maybe 2 or 3% to add a little bit more humanness and variation. So. When you get really deep with the programming, one of the fun things that you can do is start programming for parallel chords. This is something that Michael Brecker sort of pioneered and became very well known for. I have had a lot of fun programming for it on the Prophet. This is a patch that's based on a major triad that I used at the beginning of Circuit Kisser's tune Boss Stage. I also used the Akai EWI 2000. It's a really beautiful instrument. It has voltage controlled oscillators that are just gorgeous, and also a really beautiful filter. And one of the cool things about it was that it was the first commercially designed EWI brought to market by Akai and Niall Steiner back in 1986, and it just sounds absolutely incredible. I want to show you guys some of the sounds on here. It's really designed with the breath controller player in mind, whereas the Prophet 08 has taken quite a bit of work to get that kind of response. The EWI 1000 really responds that way right out of the box, so to speak. Here's the sound I used on Faking the Moon Landing. I want to take a moment also to talk about effects. Effects are essentially the auditory context in which you are hearing the synthesizer. This whole demonstration, we've been using the Lexicon PCM 70. Pretty much any time that I'm playing live, playing a solo, I always use delay also. This is a Lexicon PCM 41. It sounds really gorgeous. I'll let you hear some of that. Both of these particular Lexicon effects units are probably 30 to 40 years old. I chose them because they have a really particular color to them, grit almost, especially on the PCM 41 that I really like, paired with different synth sounds. There's plenty of modern options too. You can also use guitar pedals, plugins within the computer, and beyond. So it's also a really fun realm to explore. Let's do some ambient stuff. Both of these units are really incredible for extended reverbs and delays. basic overview of programming for the EWI. Before anyone gets into programming for EWI, though, I would definitely recommend sitting down with a keyboard synthesizer and learning the fundamentals of synthesis in that context before you begin messing around with breath and breath routing. Also, I want to acknowledge this is a very fleshed out setup. It's possible to achieve really great personalized EWI tones through a lot of other methods. Even the Akai EWI 4000S has its own onboard virtual synthesizer with editing software that you can edit and program. There's also many other analog synth options like the Roland SEO2 that respond incredibly well to breath and are available at an affordable price and sound incredible and would give you hours and hours and hours of fun learning to program for. Hope you've enjoyed this video. See you guys next time.